and for being interested in what the maybe nebulous activities of the State Society have been. And I hope for them not to be so nebulous in the future, have a really tight connection with chapter activities. So get into it. So at the state level, in nearly every meeting, the mission is referenced. So what is our mission? Conserve, preserve, and restore the native plants and native plant communities of Florida. So geographically limited to Florida, native plant communities and native plants. So not just individual species, but also the wider habitats of the native plant communities. And then the three things we do: conserve, preserve, and restore. So conserve existing ecosystems, preserve things, and then restore ecosystems that have been degraded, including landscape ecosystems. So this is a graphic from the website. It might be a little bit small, but we have a pretty complicated organizational structure for not being a very large organization. So we're 44,000-ish members, a little above. We upticked recently. I like to think it's because of the Lunch and Learns and the members only Facebook group, which have people checking to see whether or not they are members. Because it's very easy to let your membership expire, and you only get an email notification and a couple of email notifications and maybe a letter if you leave it for long enough. So I think more people are becoming aware that membership is important to us as a society, because it shows how many people are personally invested in Florida's native plants. And that's our sun there in the corner, our source of energy. So thank you, everyone. And we are organized into chapters, of course, so like a little federation of chapters. And those chapters are represented to the larger society within a organization called the Council of Chapters. So every chapter is supposed to have a chapter representative, which represents your chapter's interest to the board. And so what are your chapter's interests? You might be very concerned about, state level policy or local level policy issues, or are we getting new educational materials? Are we working on landscaping initiatives? Is your local conservation land safe? So those are interests that you might want the society to be pursuing, and that your chapter rep should be communicating your interests to the board of directors. The board of directors, of course, is my boss's boss. So my boss is Juliette Rainier, who is the executive director, and her boss is the board of directors. And that is, there's the XCOM, which is the executive committee, council representatives, directors at large, and committee chairs. And so those board meetings, we have board meetings. We were having quarterly in-person board meetings, and I'm not sure if we're going to be having, I have not been asked to organize a virtual board meeting. I know that they are having virtual board meetings. But anyways, those are open to the public and of course members if you want to attend. Those are scheduled on the Team Up calendar. You can see on most of your chapter websites. And if you're not on an email list that includes that information, I'd be happy to help you get on it. We work a lot with our partners, so we're really tightly entwined with the Florida Association of Native Nurseries, or FAN. We just signed an MOU during our annual meeting with the Florida Wildflower Foundation, and we don't work super tightly with the Fresh from Florida campaign, or currently the Wildflower Seed Co-op. And I don't know, partners and supporting organizations I would consider to be very similar. So, the Florida Forest Service, Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, who have, rare plant, I will discuss them more, Florida Fish and Wildlife, DEP, water management districts. We have both local and state level connections and coordination with organizations such as those. And then the roots are our mission. Okay. So that's a very broad overview. So we have these 5 areas of focus on how we carry out our mission. And number 1 is conservation. I mean, as you'll see, the majority of my presentation is going to be focused on conservation, because that is almost all of what we do. Florida has huge conservation needs, and we're working really, really hard to try and fill those needs, despite being quite a small organization with only a few staff members. Okay, yeah, so how many staff members do we have? So we have Juliet, who is the first ever full-time hire. She's the executive director. She was hired a couple months before I was. I was hired in September 2018. I'm full-time. And then we have Lily Anderson-Messick, who is our TorreyaKeepers coordinator in the Panhandle. And we have an intern, Joanna Munoz, who is in Orlando. And she's a grant-funded position. So 4 technically right now, but neither Lily or Joanna are full-time. Okay, so, and then we have our certain people who carry out the mission. And I missed staff, oh my gosh. Okay, so members, chapter board members, FNPS board members, FNPS partners, and FNPS staff. Of course, all staff are members. So I guess we're technically included in number 1. So we're gonna start with conservation. And I thought when I started this presentation that I was gonna draw lines to conservation and which of these 4 did each one, but everybody does a little bit of everything in this organization. We don't, even though we're very specialist in botany and very specialized in conservation, we don't have a lot of specialized roles in society. Everybody is rather a jack of all trades. Chapter board members do conservation research, FNPS board members do landscaping. We're very good at cross-pollinating. So here's an example of local chapter doing conservation. Pawpaw chapter has a program called Rugel's Roundup. Their chapter is named after Rugel's pawpaw, Asimina rugelii, or some people say Asimina. I don't know what the correct pronunciation is. And that was recently reclassified from Durinothamnus. So this was it's a very odd looking small pawpaw. So everybody has pawpaws. We have statewide pawpaws. And this is a narrow endemic to Volusia County. You can see the map on the top right. Most populations are in Tiger Bay State Forest, which is west of Daytona Beach, west of Ormond Beach, west of Port Orange, in between DeLand and Volusia County. And so they have a program called Rugel's Roundup where they do site surveys, propagation, restoration. They even do tissue culture. It's very good collaboration. So this is an example of, the state organization hasn't been, broadly involved in their local conservation work, and they've done a great job in protecting the species and making sure it's managed properly. So, they collect data and provide data to land managers to help this population in Tiger Bay State Forest thrive. So this is a statewide program, scrub balm research and restoration. We have a grant from Duke Energy and another from Florida Power and Light to do site surveys and restoration of both Dicerandra cornutissima and Dicerandra modesta. So these are plants, endemic endangered plants in the mint family. And the photo of us here on the right side that's Joanna on the left, our intern, volunteer, me, another volunteer, right after a planting day. So we were actually alerted to this population we knew about this population in the Marjorie Harris Carr Cross Florida Greenway near, Ross Prairie. So it's in like the Ross Prairie tract of the Marjorie Harris Carr Cross Florida Greenway. And we were alerted to this by a very outraged post in Florida Flora and Ecosystematics, where a botanist was appalled that I think the Florida Trail, they put this paved Florida Trail through a population of Dicerandra, and that nobody had stopped them, and why wasn't anyone paying attention? So we are helping to restore associated habitat so that the Dicerandra, that population is not extirpated. So you can see us standing by that paved trail near the location of the Dicerandra. And there's a photo of Dicerandra cornutissima. So that's the species in Marion County. So these are pretty narrow endemics. And so the Dicerandra cornutissima is in Lake and Marion County, and Dicerandra modesta is one protected population in Polk County. So I don't have any of the Polk County photos. We did a lot of very hard work in the Polk County area. And there's me and a volunteer. I'm augering holes for plants that we brought in. So, these areas have been disturbed, and instead of letting the bahia grass and natal grass re-encroach, managing these areas for high quality habitat so that the Dicerandra can flourish. So we buy plants from the natives nursery in Davenport who use local ecotype seed, and then we bring in the plants and get volunteers and then plant them. And this is grant funded work, of course. So, and we have a lot of help from the Marion Big Scrub chapter in this. Another statewide project is the Silver Glen Springs restoration. We work with Green Isle Gardens and the Florida Forest Service in Silver Glen Springs in the Ocala National Forest to plant natives to prevent erosion. So they had an engineer, and I don't have a good photo of this, but you can see there's some elevation change. So there was a lot of erosion occurring because of the high population load in this area. You know, people are just, you see in this bottom left-hand corner, you see where this truck is. Basically, there's maybe a 40-foot drop down into the boil, and people could just walk down, and the rain would flow down and wash all this sand into the boil, and the entire area around Silver Glen Springs is an archaeological site. So this was particularly bad because, you know, historic artifacts and you know, evidence of, you know, long-term inhabitation of the site was literally washing into the boil, along with sedimenting in the boil. So their engineer engineered us a plan of these berms covered in coconut core. You can see the coconut core here, and then we cut holes in the coconut core and planted really wide diversity of native plants so that people had to snake around and to walk down into the boil so to access the springs. And so it looks gorgeous. It's an incredible project. And yeah. Then up in the Panhandle, one of our only work on endangered tree that I'm aware of is our TorreyaKeepers project. There's Lily Anderson Messick in the right-hand side, looking saucy. And we have endangered tree, the Torreya taxifolia, known as Florida Torreya, or the stinking cedar. And this tree is very affected by a fungus. And we have partnered, partners with Atlanta Botanical Garden, who is doing fungicide and tissue culture research, and we are spearheading the landowner outreach. So most Torreya is on Torreya State Park. However, there are unknown populations on private land. And so this project is actually a couple years old, and it was run mostly by volunteers and private contractors until we recently acquired the capacity for staff, thus me and Lily and Juliet, to run these projects a little more consistently. And so basically we do surveys on private land, we cage plants, and there's other, we take other measurements and research to see if we can understand the plant better so we can influence its conservation and management. And then one of our projects that is pretty Central Florida focused, simply because many other chapters don't do rescues, is our ongoing Central Florida rescues in the Claremont area. And we have long-standing relationships with water management districts, county parks, and other conservation and state parks to bring these plants from development sites when they're about to get bulldozed, or even if they are not yet about to get bulldozed, create relationships with the landowners so that we can collect seeds and then propagate them with our partner Green Isle Gardens, so that we can have this locally adapted, local ecotype seed sources. So on the left, that's Torreya and plexifolia from seed collection effort in Lake County, and it is flourishing at Lake Louisa State Park. This is a seedling of, I'm not sure what, sorry. And then loading up, we get to use the Park Service gators at Lake Louisa State Park for planting. But we don't just use Lake Louisa State Park. We have restoration at Little Italy and other places. And if you'd like to know more about our restoration work in less than 4 weeks, on October 9th, we have the restoration of Little Italy with Rosie Mulholland. We worked with Rosie for years in restoring conservation areas in St. John's River Water Management District, including Little Italy, which is named so because it's shaped like the boot of Italy, and it's on the Lake Apopka's North Shore. And so now that she's a private citizen, we're gonna hear from her and one of our legendaries. Stay tuned for that. For more conservation, we do what I would consider routine rare plant work, sort of being the go-to for, hey, I have a question about this rare plant. Hey, can you help me monitor? Hey, I'm working on this project. So in the top, we have Etnia rosemary. I'm getting a little cold. Conradina etonia. And this is at Etonia Creek State Forest, which is in Putnam County. And so on the left, we're here at a work day in October doing surveying for the species. And then there's the species on the right. And then the bottom, Kara Driscoll of Naples chapter, who's also the Council of Chapters chair, is doing a statewide Asclepias fei survey, which is Florida milkweed, or as she calls it, Florida fairy milkweed. And there's her looking optimistic at Triple N Ranch in Osceola County when I helped her survey and interviewed her. And whenever I get a spare moment, I will be editing and releasing that interview so that everybody can see her perspective and what she's up to. But you can, if you're a member, you can look at your member, any of the emails I send out on Mondays, or sometimes Tuesday or Wednesdays if I'm having a hard time reaching the speaker. Every week I send out an email with the future Lunch and Learn information, so the Lunch and Learn that's happening that week, and then also links to past Lunch and Learns. And it's good to check the email every week because sometimes I do get around to editing the old ones and posting them, so there might be a new one posted. And Kara did a very good Lunch and Learn on Asclepias fei. And so again, another part of our routine rare plant work is participating in stuff like the Rare Plant Task Force meetings, which are more or less run by Block Tower Gardens, and then the FDAC's Rare Plant Advisory Council. So we have a seat on that Rare Plant Advisory Council, which triages plants that are submitted for listing and decides, whether something should be listed, and also, looks at evidence for plants that are rare that we don't have a lot of information on, or receiving new information on their population. And these sorts of things, if you have any interest in being on these committees or learning more about what these committees do, feel free to contact me or contact Melanie, and I can get you in touch with the committee chair, or describe the duties a little bit more if you are interested in adding to your workload and maybe doing something more impactful for the plants of Florida. Another thing we do is we fund conservation grants. So annual grants of up to $5,000 for 1 year. We have funded, a couple of grants every year for a number of years. I haven't done the whole history on it. I did do a Lunch and Learn with Martha Passaro, who did the Save the Bromeliads conservation project, which is on the giant air plant, Lanzea triculata. And so she's based in Melbourne. She used to work at the Space Center. And so she does the bromeliad restoration and research at the Enchanted Forest Sanctuary in Melbourne. And so that was a really good presentation that I finally edited and got up. But I'm hoping to interview more conservation grant recipients so that you can see, our members can see where this grant funding is going to. Now, of course, grant funding is actually not membership funded. So this is not like your membership dues going into this. We actually have a conservation grant endowment. So if you are really stoked about our conservation grants, you can actually go to our website, not this weekend, on Monday, and you can go to our website, you can donate specifically to conservation grants. Or if you're really savvy, you could get together with your chapter, like this happens every year, is that chapters will get together and donate a chunk of money and then donate in honor of somebody. So, in honor of Dick Workman, something like that. And then, that funds an entire other award. So we're able to fund an additional award that we wouldn't have been able to fund that year because of the donations. So, really great program. Another thing we do is we do policy to support conservation. So it's not, we're a pretty small organization with a pretty small budget, even in terms of conservation organizations in the state of Florida. I mean, I feel like we are very effective. We have a very solid social media reach, and we have very involved and competent members. However, most conservation is done with government funding and government activity. And, development rules and road building are governed by state statutes and state constitutions. So that is why we do state policy stuff and why we encourage chapters to do policy stuff. Now, of course, these are all governed by 501c3 rules. So we're talking policy, not politics. So policy is what the government does. Politics are, I support XX candidate, I support XX, political party, which we do not do as chapters or as the state level organization. Now, of course, you are still, and I am still free to support candidates, donate to candidates, but not as a part of the organization. So what we do is we educate and support policy. So we are a member of the No Roads to Ruin Coalition. That's Coalition to Oppose the M-Course Project, aka the Toll Roads to Nowhere, that were signed into law recently. And so you can see Eugene Kelly's quote. He is our policy and legislation chair. Hopefully we'll have a lunch and learn with him, I think on the 16th of October. He'll be talking about sea level rise because he lives in the Big Bend Nature Coast region and he can see it every day. So this is his main issue right now. And but he does excellent work on behalf of our society, all volunteer. We also have a lobbyist, Sue Mullins, who works on, say, for example, Full Florida Forever Funding. That's basically been our main policy initiative for the past 10 years. Every year we support Full Florida Forever Funding, and we never get it. And we also assist local chapters with your local issue advocacy. So we supported the Southeast Chapters Initiative, who did field trips with their legislators, and trained their chapters on how to speak to your local legislative delegation. And then also, you can get assistance with your local issues depending on Gene's time on. So for example, he helped me with my fight to save Split Oak, came and spoke representing the Florida Native Plant Society in opposition to the toll road through that conservation area. We have a policy committee that meets while the legislature is in session and occasionally while the legislature is not in session. This is Broward chapter, who they did a great job wearing green, and we're hoping to save executive airport natural areas. I asked Richard Brownscombe, who's the very happy looking guy, third from the right, about an update for that, and they have not developed those natural areas yet. The executive airport hasn't. I don't have but he says it's still in limbo. Okay, so that is all conservation. So we do so much conservation work. So for land management, we basically have one committee to cover land management. So Land Management Partners Committee. And the Land Management Partners Committee, what they do takes care of the Florida Forest Service and Florida State Park Management Plan. So for all of these larger conservation areas, Cape Florida, all of Topsail Hill State Park, Ocala National Forest, these are governed by land management plans. And so they have a very organized group of people who are experienced, and it's a little difficult to get on the committee because you have to kind of know what you're doing in order to get on. But you can talk to Grace and Shadow and maybe one day become an experienced assessor of land management practices and recommend management changes that would improve the native plant habitat on certain properties that you may or may not be familiar with. So, but one way to get started is the Land Management Partners Committee does not cover FWC managed properties. So if you have a land management review for an FWC property coming up in your area, which I receive the email notifications for those, I would be happy to loop you in, and you can attend one of those. And they also have public hearings that you can voice your opinions. You can, they release very much information, maps, and burn histories, and all of this stuff that you can read through and make recommendations based upon. Research is a significant part of our mission, but not a huge part of our day-to-day activities. So again, we hand out grants to cover research. So we have 2 grant programs that handle research, although the Daniel F. Austin Ethnobotany Award is not all research. Basically anything that has to do with ethnobotany, and sometimes it's research and sometimes it's more, like for example, North Florida Heritage Garden Project was more of a gardening and educational activity, but sometimes they are research. And then the research committee is basically Paul Schmalzer, and he assesses the research grant recipients and the awards, and there's a research committee. So here he's presenting at the 2017 37th Annual Conference at Grover Ranch. He's a great researcher, by the way. You should definitely read his work on the historical ecology of the Space Center, the Kennedy Space Center. Really good stuff. And we have given out a lot of research grants with a lot of really, funded a lot of really good research. Cool cactus work, Croton linearis, Florida Ziziphus. I mean, we have funded some really cool research, and I hope to get these researchers on Lunch and Learns here pretty soon. So then we also do education, and this is something that chapters do a lot of. You know, we pretty much the education committee is over there on the right, Wendy Pogue, and she has done these beautiful bookmarks, which, as you can see, I have just moved into my place and I don't have any furniture in my office, and so I have some of these bookmarks, but I don't know where they are. So if you want them, I might be able to find them in the next month and mail them to you. So I don't know why I'm on there twice. Sorry about my random self in the middle. So we produce educational materials, and regularly we produce the Palmetto, whose editor is Marjorie Shropshire, there in the top, and the Sable Miner, and I'm the editor of the Sable Miner. And then we also have our landscape brochures, and we just came out with a new brochure called Mow Less, and it's very nice. And I actually do know where my box of Mow Less brochures are. So if you have a need for some brochures, you have a little free library, or some way to socially distribute these, I would be happy to send you some. And so that's pretty much all of the education work that we do on the state. So local chapters are powerhouses of education. So plant sales, tabling, field trips, demonstration gardens. I mean, chapters have some amazing demonstration gardens, but the ones that I'm most familiar with being the most impactful are this native park, 1 and 2 in Jacksonville. They even have a sign, a really huge sign for Ixia chapter. And then the Cutting Horse Eco Center, which in Southwest Florida, which is run by Cocoloba chapter. They got a grant for this from Florida Power and Light, and they have their own native plant nursery. The place is crawling with zebra longwings and passion and Gulf fritillaries. It's just incredible. So thank you to our chapters who are doing this education work that we just don't have the staff to do. And we hope to be able to support you more in that educational work in the future with more materials and perhaps some fiscal assistance. Statewide, we have had programming, one thing, the annual conference. So when I was hired as Director of Communications and Programming, I asked them what was the programming part. And the hiring committee looked around and they said, the conference. So when the conference was canceled, postponed this year to next year, I thought, well, what happened to that part of my job? So I started doing these weekly lunch and learns, and they have become quite popular. And so we had the conference, and so I pretty much picked from presenters from the conference and been having them on the lunch and learns. But Craig Hugel was going to be, that was our keynote. The Truth About Pollinator Gardens was our keynote for the conference this year. And I'm also helping out with these quarterly meetings. So this photo is from the Wakulla quarterly meeting, and you can see a selection of board members and council of chapter representatives there. And so that usually includes lots of meetings, death by meeting, and then also some educational stuff like a workshop on iNaturalist or a how to use Google Drive or something like that. So that's also educational programming. And the last area of focus is landscaping. This is also very chapter driven. So chapters do plant sales, especially for areas where we don't have native nurseries or we don't have enough native nurseries to serve the population. Chapters really have gone above and beyond in providing native plants to people, the opportunity to purchase native plants, and also information about which native plants work where, propagating them, So there's locally sourced seeds, such as something that Cocoloba chapter does, and Pawpaw chapter does, and demonstration gardens help with landscaping, and the landscaping committee basically has one job: annual landscaping awards. And so not this past Sable Minor, but the Sable Minor before, we had landscaping awards awarded. And so these are 2 landscapes in the villages that won our landscaping awards. And we also we funded last year a model land development code project, which is being run by my chapter president, Karina Vaudry, to write a model land development code that includes native plants so that it's easily adoptable by counties and cities into their land development codes. So we don't have these, there is a chance that we don't have these awful land development codes in place that require the use of non-native plants in new residential and commercial developments. And that is all I have for that. I was thinking I might talk to you guys a little bit about like, what are my days like? What do I do? So, oh, I put my phone number on there. So my job is fairly heavy on the computer work. I do a lot of internal communication, so a lot of emails, run the social media pages, of which we have many, and there's a lot of questions and responses. So I spend some time working on that, making sure there's always content there. Then I start working on, I have a massive video backlog. I've taken lots of video starting from the annual conference last year, and I've interviewed a number of people. I have a lot of, I'm currently working on Jackie Brawley's Florida Master Naturalist program for the end of September. Organizing the Lunch and Learn, so making sure that I have the right technology to make that work, promoting that properly, so making sure the graphics are good, acquiring speakers, emailing, setting up those weekly emails. I have a monthly communications and programming report that you can read. It's posted on the forum before every board meeting. I only send that to Juliet, but that pretty much has a report of all of my activities. I do a little bit of fundraising. So, we have fundraisers on Facebook, and we have a Teespring that you can buy Native Plant Society merchandise, including redesigned landscaping posters. So those landscaping brochures that fold down into the 5x7s, we were getting so many requests to buy them that I redesigned them so that they're a large 18x24 glossy poster, and they're a little pricey at 21 bucks, but you just go to the Teespring store and buy it, and they mail it to you. So that solves, it was really a pain. Every time we ran the poster contest, we get like 6 or 7 people. Why don't you have these for sale? So solve that problem. And I also work on the member database, so if members say, oh, please change my email, or, oh, I'm not getting your emails. I say, oh, I see that you received the email, but you didn't open it. Did it go to spam? General tech support. I do a lot of general tech support for board members. Not my boss so much. She's pretty tech savvy, but board members, the president, chapter members who need help with moving online to moving their meetings online or board meetings, answering those questions about conservation activities, doing some like basic looking into status of plants and rare plants. Oh, and then, I help out on any of the work days. I'm, got a pretty strong constitution, so I help out with, augering and planting, and yeah. And, when the conference was on, I was doing a lot of conference organizing. So. All right, I am ready to take questions if anybody has any.
Well, I don't see any questions. Let me launch this other poll. Based on what you've seen today, I'm asking what area you would most like Passionflower chapter to become more active in.